Hey, welcome to Conscious Conversations, and my name's Luke McLean. If you're new to this podcast, it's a little podcast I've created that is about talking to people who I think are living really conscious, authentic, and purposeful lives, and telling their story, exploring where they've been, where they're at, and what are some of the tools, some of the practices, and tips that they could give for how to live an authentic life. And these are often authors, wellness experts, meditation teachers, leaders, etc. And the conversations for me are really beautiful. They're a gift. They're a chance for me to grow and to share the stories of these incredible people. And this week is no exception. We've really got, one of the best episodes. I think that, we've been able to talk. The depth and the curiosity within this conversation is incredible. And I'll get to that in a minute. But before that, I'd like to introduce a new project that I'm working on, which is called Breathe Meditation. It's an online mindfulness center that runs daily live meditation classes. It runs workshops. It's also where I house my coaching, where I work with people, busy people, and work and support them on how they can create space, how they can slow down, and how they can develop through coaching and mindfulness practices to live with a little more presence and purpose in what is a pretty busy world right now. And I think you'd agree. So that's the heart of my coaching, and breathes really, the daily discipline to that through meditation that really helps. So if that's of interest to you, and you're always going to get your first class free with Breathe, you can just jump on to breathemeditation.com.au, click on first class free, and jump on a class, and I'll be there. I'll guide you through your first meditation class, which is a little bit like a meditation class mixed with the coaching session. Each class begins with a topic or a theme. I try to introduce a tool, and we make it really practical and relatable to modern life. It's my style of meditation is really around how does this relate to how we can live more mindfully and how it shows up today. And that's sort of the coaching combined with the meditation. So it's quite a unique formula, but I like it. I think it's true to me, and people tend to really gravitate towards it because of the practicality of it. So I'd love to see you there. But let's get on with this episode, and this is with author, poet Maggie Smith, and Maggie's got a new book out. It's called Keep Moving, the Journal. This is a follow-on from her super successful book Keep Moving, which was this just beautiful collection of stories and poems that she brought together. And now she's brought out this journal, which is a super practical, and this is why I love it, a bit like what I just mentioned about what I do when I teach classes. It's got, these beautiful poems, these beautiful, reflection pieces. And then she asks these really deep and thoughtful questions within the journal that you then have the space within the book to write responses and do a bit of this self-work that's so important right now. So, I really love the journal. Like, I'm a huge advocate. I've been using it myself. I've actually been using some of Maggie's poems and verses within the book, in my meditation classes, and they've been really well received. So, and the conversation with Maggie had so much depth, so much curiosity, and so much exploration that it was really a gift. It was really a gift for me to be able to sit with her and, for her to give me her time. And without further ado, this is Conscious Conversations. My name's Luke McLean, and you're going to listen to Maggie Smith. So Maggie, I again would love to start with your journey into writing. You've written a few books now, and just like, where did that start? Was that when you were young, or is it something that's happened for you later in life, the writing process?
Yeah, I think I started writing poems when most people start writing poems, which is our teen years, when we have so many feelings we don't know what to do with, and nothing seems to make sense. So I think I was my daughter's age, maybe 13, when I wrote my first poem, and was off and running. And I sort of joke that I'm still doing it because it's the only thing I'm any good at. But it's only really half a joke because there isn't really any other thing that I'm both good at and enjoy as much as writing, other than I would say, parenting my
Mm.
kids. I think I'm decent at that and I enjoy it. But most other things, I didn't really have a knack for, and writing is that thing that sort of like I felt like I could do it fairly well, but it also made me feel most like myself
Yeah,
when
okay.
I was doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because there's millions of people that want to be writers. So there's this like transition from enjoying it and being good at, which I think is really important for people to understand. Is that's a sweet spot. But then, when did that start to look like that could be a career? Like when's that start to play out?
Maybe now. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, to be honest, I was a teenager writing poems. I had no idea what I would do to pay my bills. I just assumed I would somehow get out of my parents' house. And in college, I was still writing poems, and I still had no idea what I would do, as a creative writing and, philosophy student. What does one do with that? And so really it was after graduate school, or after college when I went to graduate school, and I thought, well, I still don't really know how I'll pay my bills per se, but I think I'll probably always be a writer. Like, I want to commit to this. And I saw people publishing books and doing other things. I mean, I know people who publish books who are also doctors, or also lawyers, or also working retail, or selling insurance. So we cobble a life together sometimes in other ways. I mean, many of us teach. There
Mm,
are very few of us who just write, quote
yeah.
unquote, just write. And so really only over the past, maybe 3 years have I been sort of 90% writing and 10% doing other things. But up until this point, I worked in publishing. I was a college professor.
Mm.
I've been freelancing for 11 years and editing other people's books, and just sort of carving it out however I can, and just trying to make as much space for the writing part of things as I can.
That's it's really beautiful because I think it shows up in the book, which we'll talk about in a minute. Because some people, and what you talk about in the book is it's at the cost of, like, I can't be a writer because I have to be this, or I can't. So you sort of get to that, you stop writing poems in some ways because you feel like you've got to grow up and be this person, and there's that. You can't hold the tensions between both. A lot of people, and what you're sort of saying, and in which many people, is that you wanted to create the space and the life to be able to still write, which is getting back to the roots of you as a child at your best.
Yeah, I think so. And I think for me, and I feel very lucky, honestly, that it paid off, but I kind of doubled down on it in
Yeah.
middle age. Like, I just thought, this is what I want to do. I might fall flat on my face, but if I don't try, how will I know? How will I know? I want to get up every day and be excited about how I'm spending the day. And so I quit my job when I had a 2-year-old. I quit my job and started freelancing, and I just thought, well, I'll do it for a year, and if I fall flat on my face and I can't make it work, I'll get another job. I'll go back to work. But I haven't had to. And so for me, taking the leap was really important, and investing in myself, like betting on myself in that
Yeah.
way, was important.
And do you feel like there's smarter leaps than others at different times for people? Like that leap to leap out of just nowhere of, I'm quitting my job, I've got no second plan, as to this is a more prescribed path. It's still a leap of faith, but I'm not leaping blindly.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a firstborn and a very type A person. I am a planner. I'm not a fly by the seat of your pants kind of person to this day. So the only reason I quit my job is because I at the time had a partner who had a regular job and health insurance. And
Yeah.
B, I had just gotten a big grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. And so I figured, well, there's $25,000 for poetry. If I put it in the bank and I can't get clients as a freelancer, I'm going to use that money to live off of while I find another job. So that was my safety net. I never would have, in my life now, I don't have the partner, so I don't have the safety net. I'm just, buying my insurance policy on the marketplace.
Yeah.
So but I'm already out there without a net. If I had a regular job right now and I were thinking about leaving it, I probably wouldn't, because my
Yeah.
life is not built in such a way to accommodate that level of risk.
Mm.
It's just I'm already there, so I'm sticking to it as long as I can.
And do you feel like you've built resilience around that and become accustomed to this is how I live now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was such, and I write about this and Keep Moving, but I was such a scaredy cat as a kid, and generally like risk averse to a
Mm.
fault. And there's something about having to do it and then doing it over and over again. I find that the more times I put myself out there and it's not catastrophic, because like,
Yeah.
let's face it, we always expect the worst. And 90% of the time, your worst case scenario is not going to happen. So the more practice we get at doing the things that scare us, whether it's getting on an airplane or public speaking or sending poems to magazines or, asking someone out, like whatever the thing is, the more practice you get at it, the more you realize that it's not as bad as you're building it up to be in your mind. And so the risks I've taken thus far have sort of primed me, I think, to take more of them because I have greater perspective now. I'm like, oh,
Mm.
well, it's probably going to be fine. And frankly, even if it isn't, I've been through some pretty difficult things over the past few years and I'm still standing.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
even if the worst thing happens, I trust myself to manage it.
Yeah. How important is that? That's like what you sort of said at the end, Maggie, like to trust yourself to manage things and that innate trust that we need to have. And, I think for you as a writer and just reading the Keep Moving journal, like it would be almost hypocritical for you to write this and then have this absolute safe life and to take no risk. But you're right. Like it wouldn't feel right to say, oh, I'm doing this in my 9 to 5, 20-year career that I've just been doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, like here's this thing for those of you who are into taking risks. I will not be joining you on that journey. No, I am right there with you. I mean, I wrote the book and then the journal out of my own experience.
Mm.
And not from a place of like dispensing advice from on high by any stretch of the imagination, but from a place of like being in the trenches, sort of in the weeds, in the hard stuff, and trying to sort of write my way out of it. And I'm
Mm.
still there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still hard every day. Some days are better than others. And writing helps. It doesn't solve
Yeah.
every problem, but the processing that I'm able to do by writing, I think more people should have access to that.
For sure. And I write, I've never had anything published, but the therapeutic value I get from writing every morning and to be able to put myself out there, but to then also to try to really, I think for me, it adds depths of layers to myself to sort of even find words to describe how I'm feeling that aren't the normal words that you read, to try to find different things to describe life helps.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what I think until I write it down or sometimes say it out loud. Sometimes I'll write something down or say something out loud to a friend or to my therapist, and I'll say, oh,
Mm.
I came upon that in the moment because I had to articulate it on paper or even, to another
Yeah.
person. And the act of having to articulate things for ourselves and getting them sort of concretized in words
Mm.
instead of floating around in a big flurry of anxiety in our minds, I think is really useful.
Yeah. And then going back to the conversation, Maggie, it's like often our worst, like the worst thing that could happen to us in our minds is actually not like it's never that bad. And often until we write it out and go through it a bit more clearly on paper, we can actually then see it, which we don't, in our minds, we don't see it. We just ruminate on it.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm the queen of ruminating. If there were an award for that, a trophy, I would have it behind me on the bookshelf. I mean, I'm great at that. I think we're all really good at that. You
Yeah.
know, I think in my best days, I'm nostalgic in a positive way. You know, thinking about good things that have happened in the
Mm.
past. But on my worst days, I'm replaying a conversation in my head I wish had gone differently, or something I wish had happened differently. And it's interesting how writing down some of our fears or goals or worries or some of those things helps to scale them
Yeah.
in a way. You know, like
Absolutely. Yeah.
things feel so gigantic, like the shadow that a small thing casts in our minds. And then writing the thing down, I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, that goal actually seems really doable when I just
Mm.
kind of like step it out in three different steps. Like first I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and then I need to do this.
Yeah.
That's not that bad. Or I'm worried about this thing and I write it down and I'm like, actually, when I see it on paper, it sounds kind of ridiculous. Like, what are the odds of that thing happening now that I've said it out loud? It helps us, I think, scale things and get some perspective and look at things in their proper size.
Yeah. And it takes us away, Maggie, from filling up. Like we just fill up on social media and technology. Well, the brain's filling up, where the writing in many ways is the emptying out. Instead of more, it's less of what's in that mind to put it somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Like we're just sort of like filling, and then there needs to be a sort of release valve for some of that. And
Yeah,
writing can
and
be that.
yeah, I teach meditation, and it's like you can't keep inhaling. Eventually, you got to exhale. You got to let go of the breath as well as you got to bring the breath in, and that's
Yeah.
sort of the same as life. You've got to accept and let go. Or you can't have both. You can't have one. Sorry, you can't just have all letting go and no acceptance, and you can't have the opposite. It just doesn't work.
I love the idea. I love the sort of metaphor in that of writing as sort of exhaled
Yeah,
breath. I love that. The sort of release of that and just how palpable. I mean, that's, I think part of, I honestly, I don't know how to type. So that's part of why I love handwriting things. But part of it is just the tactile sensation of having a pen in your hand and hearing the sound of
mm.
pen on
Yeah,
paper and seeing the words in your own writing, not in
yeah,
some generic font that could have been written by anybody, but it's really yours. And somehow that to me, and that's why I think journaling is so useful, that to me means more. It goes a little bit deeper than just going to your tablet or your laptop and typing something up.
yeah. Do you think there's a little bit more? Also, that journaling by hand, there's a bit more ownership because you've written it down rather than typed it, because it's the process of you doing it, not just, yeah, as you said, the generic typing.
Yeah, and it's yours. I mean, when I see
Yeah.
something in my handwriting, or if somebody else sees something in my handwriting, they know it's mine. Like it's, you know, it's a fingerprint. If my kids see something in my writing, it touches them in a different way than if I would type them up a note and put it in their
Mm.
lunchbox. That feels
Yeah.
somehow like it's less intimate, I think.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking to ourselves or having a conversation with ourselves, which is sort of what we're doing when we journal or do our, you know, morning pages or whatever it is that we do as sort of like a self-care practice, I think having it in handwriting makes it more personal and intimate for us too.
Yeah. Yeah. And those things, I think, in modern life we're missing deeply in many ways. So I think it's a much needed um, skill and practice to come back in, especially for kids.
Oh yeah, I love the idea that could be a skill, because the skill I'm missing is being able to type quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so the idea when people say like, I love your handwriting, I'm like, well, good, because I get a lot of practice with it. Because
Mm.
pretty much everything I write has to be handwritten first. I have a sort of brain to
Yeah.
pen connection, not necessarily a brain to keyboard connection.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm interested in your process of writing, Maggie, because, the journal especially, it's a spacious book. There's beautiful bits of poetry in there. And then there's almost like reflective questions to talk through. And so it's a book really about less. So many books that you read, they're about more. There's lots of pages, and it's almost sometimes when you write them, it's about trying to fill the book, as opposed to you've really got a lot less in the book. So how do you go about choosing what comes in, what goes out, and knowing that there's only so much that can go into it? So how does that look and feel for you?
Yeah. You know, Keep Moving the book was so much about my own personal journey. Like, this is what I'm going through. These are the things I wrote to myself each day as kind of pep talks.
Yeah.
Here are the essays that kind of give you context for where and how I built that resilience. And one of the things that people asked for was a journal. So the idea for the journal actually came from readers. I'm not that strategic in my career. So the idea really came from readers. And so when I was thinking about designing it, my first thought was, what quotes, either new ones or ones from the original book, are the most sort of fertile for further exploration for them? Like, forget me. This isn't about me. That's the difference between the journal and the book. The journal, the book is about me. And I think people kind of read their own life experiences into it, as we do when we read any bit of literature. We read a poem and it makes us think of this one time we had with our mother or something. But the journal was really built for readers, and for writers to get in there and be able to sort of crack something open and have discoveries for themselves. So when I got the first draft back from design at the publisher, I looked through all of the prompts. I mean, I wrote all the questions myself, and I looked through all the prompts, and I thought, I think we need more pages to answer this particular question. Like, this is one I could really go off and running for. Or I don't think we need as much space for this one. And so it's a little bit intuitive, but I wanted to give enough room that people could feel like they could stretch out and write as much as they wanted, but not so much space that you would feel like, oh, well, I only have 2 sentences here, but she's given me 4 pages. Am I not doing enough? No, you're doing it just right. Your way is just right.
And you going through it, you feel that in the journal. Like, so often you've got journals and they've got just the same amount of room for every question, and some of these questions are hugely deep. And you're like, I've got 6 lines to talk about my life's purpose and my values. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to capture that. So it would immediately put you off, because it's like, I can't put it here. So then you've got to go and find another book or something where you know, within the journal, it can be done, which is awesome. And I was wondering, is it like, how different was it, this process of writing this for the readers as opposed to for you? And how did that shift how you went about it?
Well, I mean, the writing of the quotes was pretty similar. It's some of them I pulled from the book because they were sort of like the best loved quotes. And then some of them I've written new because of whatever I've been going through and processing during the sort of pandemic time that we've all sort of been in the same stuff together. So really the new process for me was writing the writing prompts and the questions. And so I just thought, okay, what do I think we all probably need to unpack right now? Like, because we're all, even if the stuff that each of us is going through is a little bit different from our neighbor, there are things that they have in common. If you lose a job or have a job, but they're thinking about leaving it, or in a relationship, or just got out of a relationship, or think that maybe you need to leave your current relationship, or you want to move, or you have to move, or you've got a diagnosis that scares the hell out of you. I mean, all of these things are different, but I think they create some of the same kind of life anxiety in us, which is like, what now? What do I want? What are my priorities? How can I reframe this experience for myself, not as just pure good if it's hard, because I really want to resist the sort of like toxic positivity or like good vibes only thinking. I
Yes,
really
yes,
can't,
yeah.
I can't handle that. Like I'm here for
No.
all the vibes. I'm a poet. I'm here for all the vibes. So I don't want to ever give, readers the suggestion that you need to have something negative happen in your life and then quickly grab your pen and snap into the ability to see all the silver linings of that experience. No, no, no. Wallow if you must, and we must. But I think having a space to write about some of these difficult experiences, it gives us some time to sort of reframe it and see it not just as only negative, but as also something else. Like maybe
Mm.
it is destructive, this thing that's happening in our life. It's ruined this one part of our life, or it's eaten away at this one corner of our life, or it's burned this thing down that we thought was really important. And it's also, in doing those destructive things, created a space for us or forced an opportunity for us
Yeah.
to think about, okay, then what now? Like I can't I can't continue to do things the same way because of
Mm.
this thing that maybe has been foisted upon me and maybe I hate it. But I can't continue in the same vein. So what now? What do I do with that? What positive can I create from this upheaval or this change? And so my hope is that with the journal, people have this space inside it to kind of play some of that out on paper and
Yeah.
explore some of those things and also wallow, like
Yeah.
feel it, really
Yeah.
feel it, but don't get stuck in the negative. Find a way to push through that too and see some of the possibilities in store.
Mm. Yeah. And it, like what you said then, Maggie, like that space, the space to reframe, like that, like again, often when we're in those moments, we feel like we've got no space.
Mm.
We're just full, and again, the mind's busy, and we don't have that space. And then it's hard, space is, my belief is space is one of the most challenging things we've got. We fill moments and we fill everything. So we don't have any perceived space. Everything's busy. So if we don't have space, how do we reframe?
Yeah.
Because we're just going to keep going all the time. We actually don't have that pause moment to then reframe. So I love what you said then, is it gives you the space to reframe. And I think what you're sort of saying is really interesting with the pandemic and everything that's happening is that this book's at time to pause a little bit.
Mm. We need it. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's funny. The thing that we need is space. And I think some of us, and maybe myself included, resist it because if we
Yeah.
stay really busy and we keep our minds really loud and we have a long to-do list and we're go, 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 and we're really productive, we feel valuable in that
Yeah.
productivity, but also we don't have to deal with some of the more
Yes.
painful things because frankly, the moment you sit down and quiet your mind, probably what you will not find first is peace.
No, 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 exactly.
Right? I
Exactly.
mean, when
Yeah.
I sit down, if I'm going through a really difficult time personally and I sit down and I make space for it to feel it and to write about it and to process it, I am not immediately in a peaceful space. I'm in a painful space.
Yeah.
And so part of making space, I think we resist it because it requires us to take a moment and just let things happen and let things wash over us and feel sad or feel angry or frustrated or whatever those emotions are that we need to sort of process before we can get to the peace
Yeah.
part. We just want the peace, but that's not
Yes.
the way it works. It's not on the menu. We don't just get to shift from busy to peace. We have to move through the stuff. And I think writing helps me move through the stuff in a productive way to get toward the more peaceful place. I don't know about
Yeah.
you. That's
I
me.
think you're right. It's that toxic good vibes only, and the good vibes is let's have the peace and serenity and contentment in our life right now. And
If
it's like,
only.
yeah, only like don't have it. But and what I find, and when I work with people, it's okay. Let's look at the challenge. Let's look at the struggles, and let's lean into them with curiosity,
Yeah.
and really explore them, and then give it that space to pull it apart a little bit more and deepen into it. And then when you can do that, often you'll find a bit of peace and space within the curiosity to open that up and ask questions with a bit more space, and then allow the kindness and compassion to come in through the curiosity.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, just being an awareness.
Yeah.
And that's an awareness is so important. And there's no way to peace other than through awareness, but awareness can also be painful, right? So we need to be able to go there, I think. And that's the tricky part.
Yeah, because the painful spot for a lot of people, I think, is like non-acceptance. You're not accepting the moment as it is or what's happening, so you're not willing to fully accept it, but you're also not taking action. So that there's the middle ground of non-acceptance, non-action, and that's the struggle.
Yeah, that's the stuckness.
Yeah,
yeah.
And that's the pain point for people, and that's where there's a lack of peace, feeling of contentment, or even possibility sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I mean, I think in some ways writing, that sort of exhale of writing for me, it's sort of about, it is that release valve, right? It's about sort of like getting clearing. It's about clearing space inside,
Yes.
making room. Yeah. I mean, it's really powerful. And it's funny. I mean, as a writer, I wouldn't say that I use writing as quote unquote therapy. When I'm working on a poem, I'm really working on a poem that I want to be able to publish. I rarely write anything that I don't think about as being at least, the kindling for something that I think I will share later.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily equate it with that, but I think for a lot of us, it can be that, particularly those of us who don't write professionally. How is it useful if you're not a quote unquote writer?
Yeah.
How is it useful to introduce a daily writing practice into your life? What would that do for you? So what if you never show it to anybody else? So what if you maybe only show it to your partner, or maybe it just becomes part of your things that people find long after you're gone? So what does it do for you to be able to work out some things on paper? And I think it could do a lot, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. And sometimes maybe the unwillingness sometimes is because there's not that outcome, that clear outcome of, if I write, it's going to do this and this. There's a bit of, again, writing for not knowing where it might end up.
Yeah. And that's the sort of cult of productivity too, right? Like the idea of productivity in writing always makes me nervous because of the word product.
Yes.
And I think one of the worst things I kept hearing during, over the past year and a half, almost 2 years, is, wow, we have so much time on our hands. We should all be so productive now. And it's like, what? No, I don't want to. I really want to get away from the idea of our value as human beings being somehow tied to like what we are able to make or do in a day. And that the taller your pile of made or done things is, the sort of like more value you feel like you have in the world. I mean, I get it. It's capitalism. This is sort of the world we live in, but divorcing our creative practice from the idea of productivity and sort of attaching it to like health even, or it's just pure self-expression, not for consumption, I think is so important. And it's something I need to learn myself too. Like, why not have certain writing that is for others and certain writing that is just for self?
Yeah. And when, in many of the questions here, what you explore, Maggie, is like everything comes at a cost. So that the cost to be so productive and to be always busy, always on the go, comes at the cost of something, whether that's your family, your kids, your health, and again, if all you do is focus on your health, it's going to come at the cost of career, for instance. So it's the ability to balance the costs and build that relationship to those. That's really important. I think people sort of, again, but you need the space to reflect on that and understand in anything we do, what does healthy look like? What does unhealthy look like? Because again, there's always going to be a relationship of healthy and unhealthy in some ways. And if you know what healthy looks like, and if you also know what unhealthy looks like in important relationships and parts of your life, then you know when you've sort of gone off kilter and how to bring it back.
Yeah, when you're tipping a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's different. It's different for all of us. I mean, I know some of the questions in the journal sort of prompt the reader to sort of think about priorities, right? Like, whenever we're goal setting, we're thinking about priorities. Like what's important to you? Because my life balance and what feels normal and natural and healthy to me might not be yours or my neighbors. I mean, all of us have our own sort of secret recipe of what feels right to us as far as all those things. But we're not able to sort of keep that balance if we don't know what it is, if we don't know what the ingredients are and what amounts. And so taking time to really think about that and not measuring ourselves and our sense of balance against everybody else. Well, so-and-so goes to the gym 5 days a week and they're coaching soccer and they're able to do this, this, and this. Well, it's like, well, I would be miserable if I did all of those things. So what's the measuring stick?
Absolutely. Yeah. Which for me comes back to understand your values and your purpose. And again, back to probably our starting conversation is, you write poetry at 13 because you love it and because you're pretty good at it. Right?
I love that.
You weren't coaching soccer you weren't coaching soccer at 13 or even playing soccer because you hated it. So why now would I want to think that I need that to be of value to society if it's not my thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think about purpose a lot. Like how am I, especially if I'm having sort of a down day, one of the best questions I can ask myself on a down day is how can I do the most good today? How can I be of use?
Yeah.
How can I be of the best use today? And it's never going to be from coaching soccer, as I do not understand when someone is offsides. I see people call it. I don't understand it. I don't understand what that guy just couldn't run and score that goal. So that's not ever going to be how I'm of most use. Probably it's going to be some, mentoring, writing, caretaking, baking something and taking it to somebody I know who could really use it, sending, a text because I know somebody's having a hard time, like that sort of outreach. How can I be of use? How can I do the most good? And that doesn't look the same for all of us because our skill sets are different and our strengths are different. And so really thinking, I think, about that, like what did I come here to do? What am I here for?
Yeah.
And why am I wasting my time, spending 75% of my day doing stuff that's not that?
Yeah. And if you're doing that and you don't love it, the cost of energies, it's like you're gonna burn that fuel a lot quicker because this is stuff that you're not enjoying, that it's not your thing, it's not your wheelhouse. So it's taking energy at a much quicker rate. Whereas often, for you or for me, to writing might take energy, but it's giving a lot back at the same time.
Oh yeah, that it's an energy. It's sort of there's a flow, right? It's like it's take and give, take and give, take and give. It's kind of a wheel, a circuit, and not everything feels that way. I have a friend who said, from now on, if it's not a definite yes, it's a no. If somebody asks me to do something and I don't feel an enthusiastic yes, if I can't absolutely at the gut level upon being asked embrace that opportunity, then probably it's not my opportunity. I should pass that by because that taking the time to do that thing that I feel kind of lukewarm about means two things. One, I'm not spending that time doing something I would really be fulfilled by or might be better at. And two,
Yeah.
it's probably taking that opportunity from somebody else who might be
Yeah.
an enthusiastic yes for that
Yeah.
opportunity. So maybe you're also you're sort of paying something forward by passing on things that really aren't for you.
Yeah. I love that. I love that sort of, that little framework of, what you're going to say yes or no to. Like, I think that's a really good basic framework to sort of build your foundation of how you're going to respond to things.
Yeah, we say yes to too many things.
Oh, way too many. Way too many things. And the problem is we say yes to things because of exactly what you said, the societal conditioning of we should say yes to a lot because that will make us more purposeful or more productive. And that's what we need. And rather than us going inward to going, is this what I really need, as opposed to what everyone's telling me I need.
Yeah. Like if we stopped letting sort of guilt and obligation make most of our decisions and started really sort of going on sort of gut level purpose and goal setting, like, what do I want to do with my life? How am I most useful? How can I do the most good? Okay, here are the 5 asks that came in today via email. Which of these asks align with what I think my purpose is, with how I can do the most good, with what gives me joy, with what feeds my soul, and which of these asks do not align with those things? And I think, I say that from a place of not being great at it. It's still hard for me to say no. I want to be nice. Well, we also want to be nice, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, not knowing you about this conversation, and you want to serve, you want to help people, you want to do that. So that's, again, innately what you're about. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, it is. It is. And sometimes having to say, you know what, I am sorry that I am not able to be of service in this particular way at this time.
Yeah.
But if there's something I can do for you in the future, let me know. Or I have this other person in mind who might be better for this opportunity. Or know that I'm saying no because I have these things on my plate and not because I don't want to be of service. And most people are really understanding.
Yeah, and that's so nice. Like, even flowing that back to what you said before, Maggie, in terms of someone else is probably waiting for this opportunity that you've just asked me for right now. And if I could give that to that person, that's like a win-win, because I can't do it right now, but that person would love to respond or have you on or to help you out.
I have to say, I never thought of that as an option until very recently. In the past year, I had to resign something. I mean, I said I would do it, and I had to come back and say, I cannot do that thing. I am so sorry. I've never done this before. As a firstborn child, type A person, I have never committed to something and then walked back and said, actually, I can't, but I just know I cannot do it and I will not do it well. Mm-hmm. So please don't make me fail at this. I want you to have somebody who's really going to do what you need them to do. It's not going to be me. And I felt torn up about it for weeks. And then I ended up meeting somebody for a drink one night. And he said, oh, you do know that when you couldn't do that, my wife took that position. And it has completely changed our lives. It's forayed into this other thing. And now we're able to do this. And we just bought a house. And she's able to do this. And now they're expanding the position to mean this, this, and this. And I couldn't have done any of those things. It would never have been that for me because I didn't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
So hearing him say that just made me realize so much how probably other times, without knowing that directly, things that I have passed on have led to greater opportunities for other people. And probably I've received opportunities from others having said no, and people have come to me. And so there's the idea of scarcity is one that I'm trying to put out of my head, and that there's plenty for all of us, and to think about saying yes or no as part of the sort of sharing economy.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And do you think for you, Maggie, like, when you started out as a writer and you're a freelancer and you're going it alone, you was your mindset to say yes to everything because there was that scarcity, where now you've sort of, you've elevated, and now it's a flip on that. There's stuff you've got to say no to. So it's a different feeling. It's a different area to play in.
Oh, absolutely. And I caution, as I mentor new freelancers, I caution against that. But it's so easy to do. It's so easy to say yes to everything
Mm.
when you don't know. I sort of thought of myself as a squirrel, burying as many acorns as possible because
Yes.
I didn't know how long the winter would be. So when you don't know where your next check is coming from, it's just so easy to say yes to everything, whether you think it's going to be interesting or whether it's even particularly well paying or something that you think is strategic. It's just like, yes, I'll take it because I have no idea how I'm going to make this work. And as I got a little bit more sort of seasoned in it, I realized I can't do that. I'm going to burn myself out, first of all.
Mm.
But also, not all of these are my field of expertise. And I think I actually will do better if I specialize a bit and pass on some of these things that are not quite my bag,
Yeah.
and say yes to other things and trust that people will come back to me and that word of mouth will help grow the business. And again, I feel really lucky that it panned out. But of course, in the beginning of a new venture, I do think we feel obligated to take on maybe more than we would
Absolutely.
later. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When did you, Maggie, was there a time, I know you said jokingly before that just now, but was there a time when you sort of, you go, okay, so I've kind of made it now, not made it, but I'm on the path now to this is a career. This is something that's viable for me. I'm getting really good reviews by some really great people and getting exposure. Like, was there a time that sort of that switch got flicked a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm like 6 books in right now, and I think, after I would say like my third book, I thought, okay, I wasn't a flash in the pan. Like
Mm.
I think I'll have a career. I think I can keep doing this. Like the
Yeah.
poems, thank God, keep coming.
Yes.
There was a while in the beginning where every time a poem would show up, I was just like, oh my gosh, I thought the last one was the last one. Or I thought the last book was the last book. And I think after a few, I realized like, no, I think I have some longevity with this, but longevity in your art and the ability to pay one's mortgage
Mm.
is not the same thing. And
No.
so I think I realized, a few books ago that I had longevity in the art. And I think
Mm.
I'm just now starting to feel that I have the ability to better support myself as a
The
writer.
financial, yeah,
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 and I think and some of it is just recalibrating the balance. For a long time, I've always cobbled my life together doing lots of different things. So for a long time, it was mostly editing, and then a little
yeah,
bit of writing, and then I was like, oh well, actually no, I'm making more money as a writer, so now I can scale back on the editing a little bit. So now it's like half and half.
yeah,
And then the teaching kind of picked up, so I could scale back some of the editing because I was taking on teaching. So the balance and the sort of pie chart of what I do and how I make a living is always sort of shifting. Obviously, the public speaking aspect completely disappeared during the
yes,
pandemic. So for a while there, pre-COVID, about half of my income came from traveling and teaching and doing keynote addresses or
yeah,
giving readings, and suddenly that entire stream just completely dried up, not unlike touring musicians who all of a sudden like
yeah,
go play gigs.
yeah,
So again, I'm like, okay, so I can't do that. I'll pick up more editing or I'll
yeah,
take on another teaching gig. So it's kind of about flexing up and down as much as possible and
yeah.
trying to
And
stay
that,
nimble.
well, yeah, and what it sounds like, Maggie, which is I feel for people that don't, but that diversity builds resilience because you've got different platforms or foundations to flex into when needed, which is really nice. Which sounds like also that it's quite energizing for you to have a few different streams, so you're not just having to write all day every day. That you've got outlets. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with like what they tell you about investing, right? It's like you don't dump everything into one
no,
stock.
that's right.
They tell you to
Yeah,
diversify. And so I feel like, at least as a self-employed person, I am in charge of myself, and I don't have a boss, and therefore I don't have anyone paying me.
yeah,
I have to pay myself. And so the best way I can think of to do that is to keep it diversified as much as I can, so that when things like the pandemic hit and I can't leave my house, I'm still able to put food on the table and pay my bills. And so it's been really important. And I feel really lucky that all of these things are writing related or writing adjacent. So
yes,
it's, even if, say, book royalties, some months are paying more bills than others, but regardless of whether it's like literal book money or not, the editing work I get, the teaching work I get, the public speaking work I get is all based on what I do
yeah,
as a writer. So my books are paying my bills, even
yeah,
when they're not literally paying
yeah.
my bills.
And I love that, because I also love that what the diversity gave you too, Maggie, was it still gave you purpose to get up in the morning. Then paid the bills, but also there was stuff to do for you. It was a purpose for you to go and write or to edit, as opposed to if you were just a speaker and that was taken away, then you're in the house. What do I do with my days?
Oh
Which
my
makes a
goodness.
challenge, which
Yeah,
people
I
felt
would have
challenged.
taught school.
Mm.
I would have just taught my two kids as they were home teaching. No, you're right. And I think, other than writing, the other things I do all have a service component. It's
Yes.
when
Yeah.
I'm editing books for other poets, I love that work because I'm being of service. I can look at their book and say, "Oh, these poems are terrific, but I would make these changes, and I would retitle it, and I would shuffle these poems, and I would do it in this order, and I think this is a stronger book." And when I'm teaching, I'm kind of doing the same kind of work, which is to
Yeah.
say, you have these strengths, you should capitalize on them, and also, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Because I can be of
Mm.
service as someone who's a little further down the same path you're on, and help you
Yeah.
in that way. And so that work is work that, even frankly, if I were John Grisham and didn't
Yeah.
have to work doing anything other than writing, I would still be working on other poets' books, and I would still be teaching, because I think, for the work I've done thinking about my purpose and what makes me feel like I'm doing the most good, I think those two activities are part of how I do the most good.
Yeah. Which makes a beautiful reflective question in terms of, even if you had all the money in the world, would you still be doing what you're doing today? It's like
Yes.
that ability to go, yeah, I would. I'd still be teaching and editing and working with people to make them better, because that's a bigger why as to just the nuances of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if someone can ask you, if you won $50 million, would
Mm.
your life look the same? And if you can answer more or less yes, you're doing
Yes.
something right. I mean,
Yeah, I love that.
would I travel more? Would I buy shoes? Would I probably spend more money on takeout? Yes. Would I really binge buy a bunch of records? I absolutely would. I mean, there are probably some things I would have a great time doing, but as far as work and how I spend my time and who I spend it with and what I spend it doing, I don't really think it would make a bit of difference.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's so good. And again, back to our initial discussion, that space to empty out and ask that question, and the gold you'll get in return to the response can really help get some clarity and context of who you are and where you are. Either you're closer to who you want to be, or you're a bit further than you should be and come
Yeah.
back a little bit.
And mind the gap, right? Like
Yes.
like I think about that a lot. It's like, what's the gap between the life you're living and the one you sort of envision or imagine for yourself? And how wide is that gap, and what kind of work do you need to do to close it?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't know what the gap looks like, or how wide it is, or what the steps might be, unless we articulate it for ourselves, you know?
Yeah, I have this thought, and it might be wrong. Like I think we all do stuff. We do everything we do is to feel something, right? That's the whole purpose. We buy a house to feel warm and secure. You know, we meet people to feel connected. You know, everything's to feel something, and it's sort of someone's doing something or on a path. It's what are you trying to feel from this? What's the feeling that you're wanting from taking this action? And if this action's not serving you, can you find some other form of action, behavior, connection that will give you the same feeling that's more suited to you?
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, and that's my thing when I talk to people. It's like everything is based on, you know, and sometimes it's to feel enough, or it's to feel loved by your dad that didn't love you, which creates a toxic path to go on. But it's always to feel something.
Yep. I mean, that's human, right? I mean, isn't it?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
yeah. I mean, we're always searching that sort of sense of peace and well-being, and some of the things we do in pursuit of that are healthy things, and some of the things we do in pursuit
yeah.
of that are not. But
Mm.
which makes it even more important, I think, to really sort of self-interrogate and look at not only our behaviors, but like why, like what are we
Yeah,
trying to accomplish with this, and what might it be, how might we access that or get at that in a better way.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Maggie, how do you go about writing? Like when you get a poem or a little piece of work, which, you know, I've got your book here, like when do you know it's finished? Like when do you think, like what's that difference between like it's like there's work to do, or that's it, like that's the end product, and I'm happy with that.
Oh my gosh, it's different every time, but I would say it's just intuitive, and
Mm,
mostly it's like it doesn't nag or chew at me anymore. Like when it's done, it's I know it's done because when I look at it, I don't see things that need to be fixed.
yeah,
I don't. I'm not seeing its faults.
yeah.
It feels like it's doing the work it came to do. And
Mm,
sometimes I'm wrong. I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes I write a poem and I send it out to a magazine, and the magazine, they like it and they publish it. And then later I go to collect it in a book, and I go back and I look at that poem and I think, nope, nope, don't like the end, don't like the title, don't like the way I use commas, don't like the line breaks, think half of it needs to be lopped off. Um, because I'm changing, right? As
yes.
the maker. And so, I'm very lucky in that a lot of the things I've written over the course of my life I wouldn't change. There are some things that probably if I were writing them today, I wouldn't do it exactly the same way. But I wouldn't go back and change them now, because each piece of writing is sort of a time capsule for who I
Mm,
was and what my thinking was at that time. So if I look at my first book and those poems were written in my 20s, even with the same subject matter, I wouldn't craft those poems the same way, but I wouldn't revise it because that's my 20 something year old
yeah,
book.
yeah,
It's
that's
like
right.
I wouldn't Photoshop pictures of myself from that period to look more like myself now either. I mean, why would I do
No,
that to my thinking?
yeah, yeah, that's a really beautiful way to put it. Like again, that acceptance of that's who I was then, and
That's who I was
I'm
then. Yeah. And
yeah,
and it's about letting go. I mean,
yeah,
and that can be the trickiest thing with a piece of writing. And I don't know that it gets really any easier. Like how many poems or how many books do you have to write before you feel comfortable just kicking the thing out of the nest and showing
mm,
it to others and giving it to others and sort of releasing it into the world? And in some ways it never gets any easier. It always feels like a vulnerable act. But I think maybe over time and just with maturity and perspective, we learn to trust ourselves. a little bit more. So even though it's still intuitive when a poem or a piece of writing is done, I think I trust my intuition more at 44 than I did at 24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you've got older, has your churn rate of poems matured? Like, has it lessened? Like, do you write less poems and more find the pages, or is it still the same?
It's honestly, my writing process is pretty much the same as it's been since I was probably 17 years old. It's still a complete mess. I still revise many, many, many times. I still send work off to trusted readers and ask them for help. I'm not an
Yeah.
island. So I
Yep.
like
Beautiful.
to show work to other people. I don't think I'll ever outgrow that. I don't think there's any. I know some writers get to a certain place and they're like, nope, I know it. It's done. I don't have to show it to other people. I really like that sort of collaborative aspect of showing work to others and hearing their feedback and considering it as I work on my own stuff. So it has not changed, and I don't think in the next 20 or 30 years it will change. And to me, in some ways, that's comforting. The
Yeah.
work changes, but the process is what it is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's great. It's so nice to hear that it's still messy, it's still imperfect, and that's okay. Like, that's just the reflection of the book. Like, that's and the reflection of life.
Yeah, that's
You know?
authentic. I mean, there's no other way. I think I would be very suspect of someone who had a messy writing process and then got to a certain point in their life and like, no, I just sit down and I write a poem and it's done. It's just first draft, it's done. Because to me, that sounds very self-satisfied and quite lazy. I mean,
Yes.
and also not like that much fun. I mean, part of what keeps me writing poems is that I don't know where they come from. I don't know where they're going. I don't always understand what my own mind seems to want to get out on the page. And that creative problem solving and the sort of mystery of it is what keeps me coming back to it. So if it suddenly got very easy and rote, I think I'd just get bored and I'd find some other thing to do.
Yeah. It's really, when you say that, it's like, again, you have to enjoy that process. But in anything you do, if all you're doing it again is for the outcome, just sell a bunch of books, but you're hating the process, or it's become, so streamlined and so conditioned or commercial that it's no longer fun, but you're still getting the outcome. Yeah, would you keep doing it? So
no,
I love that. No, that's right, exactly.
No,
but
I would have to find a new challenge, because for me, that's the joy. The joy is the trouble, like the delicious trouble of it is what keeps me coming back to it.
Yeah, but I reflect on that with a CEO or a leader or someone who's in a job that they're still getting paid good money and they're doing great, but the doing of work now is no longer enjoyable.
Yeah.
But you're getting the outcome that you need. It's a challenging one how long do you stay in that? And again, what's the cost of another 10 years of that as your process?
Oh, and if your job satisfaction is that low, then probably your life satisfaction is also very low. And that applies to our personal relationships. That applies to everything. Like if you are in a rut, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like that's not very tenable for very long. And it also tends to like color other aspects of our lives, right? If you're miserable at your work, your partner knows it. And if you're miserable in your relationship, it's probably affecting your work or your creative output, or your parenting, or, your friendships, or whatever else is going on.
Yeah. Because everything's connected.
Oh yeah. I mean, if we're not being holistic about it, then what are we doing?
Before we go, Maggie, I don't know whether you'd like to, or if I could read my favorite bit from the book, because I
would love that.
Part of it that I love. So would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it?
I would like you to read it, because I have a Central Ohio accent and you do not.
Okay. I hope I don't ruin it too much for you.
You will not.
So this is page 72, and it's just, you are not for everyone. No, you are for yourself and for the people who love you. There is something much worse than being misunderstood or disliked. Not understanding or liking yourself. focus on your own wholeness. That's what integrity means, and let the rest go. And I think from what we just said then, someone that's in a job that they don't like, or it's going to affect the family. I just love that idea when I read that is we're not for everyone, and don't try to be for everyone, because that's going to burn you out really quickly. That's what I took from it. But you are for yourself and the people who love you. Like that, there was just a real depth to that. And then as it goes on, that was the one that really resonated.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that one resonated with you. I thought about that. I joked with my agent for a while that I should write a book called I'm Not for Everyone. Because I think, again, we want to be nice. We want to be accommodating. We want, in some ways, to be all things to all people. But in order to do that, we would have to be a very watered down version of ourselves.
Yes.
Wouldn't we? I mean, I think I would rather be my very sort of kooky and very specific, authentic self, and be just right for a smaller amount of people than marginally okay for all. So
I love that.
And that goes for, your creative work and your professional life and your personal style and everything. It's like, if you're trying to please everyone, you're probably not really pleasing very many people at all.
Yeah.
I'd rather make 5 people really, really happy than 500 people like, eh.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And that's exactly what that poem does for me. So
yeah.
Thank you.
I'm so glad. This has been so much fun. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you, Maggie. Really appreciate it. The book, Keep Moving, the journal. When does that come out, Maggie?
October 26th.
Yeah, beautiful. So, and I just think there's such a need for books like this. Like books where you can do some inner work with the book. I think that's a real need right now for people. So I love it and couldn't recommend it anymore.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you.